Out of general principle. Teddy was a well-paid courier driver in his early 30s who lived with his older sister and helped care for her children, as the children's father passed away in a car accident several years ago. He's had a string of turbulent, short-lived relationships with women following an unhappy marriage, as his wife was untrustworthy due to unfaithfulness and substance abuse. He frequently made decisions with women that seemed spiteful, dramatic, and somewhat self-defeating. Teddy was also hot-tempered on the job and actually took medication prescribed by his family physician for anger and agitation. He admitted with some shaking of his head about himself that he had a tendency to react way too strongly to his supervisors and co-workers at his job. He admitted that sometimes he made rather risky decisions in interacting with drivers out on the road. He had several powerful confrontations with supervisors over things being unfair. He has become embittered about his fellow employees who seem to get breaks here and there, and he doesn't feel he gets, as he has even had some road rage incidents where he has confronted other drivers to the point where he has blocked them with his van while yelling at them about their driving. When discussing these decisions with his therapist and the subsequent problems that came from them, Teddy regularly used the phrase "I did" out of general principle. Teddy regularly used the phrase "I did it out of general principle" in order to justify those possibly self-destructive or dangerous actions. He admitted to being tense in general, almost waiting for the next offense. When it comes, Teddy is locked and loaded for confrontation and reacts pridefully and frequently in an exaggerated manner. He is aware that there is no good reason to risk losing a good-paying job over a slight offense that doesn't really matter in the long run. But the phrase general principle keeps coming up again and again in sessions. Teddy admitted that he gets easily offended, likely too easily offended. However, he stated that he can't let people get over him out of principle, and felt justified in that way in doing things that don't really make his job better, his relationships with women work more smoothly, or help his family life with his sister's children. As a result, his therapist noted that Teddy was always unhappy and gloomy about life, and that Teddy can't ever seem to make progress at working through his problems because he appears to be sabotaging his own progress. In the most general sense of the word, someone saying principled is a complimentary thing to say about them, and means that they are an individual who has a firm set of morals, as well as someone to be admired for their strength and integrity. Most people would want to be seen as having principles, and would take it as an insult to be said otherwise, as it would insinuate that they are someone who is greedy, unscrupulous, and would do anything that benefits themselves, regardless of the effects on others. Speaking about doing something out of principle, however, is almost always like shooting up a flare high up into the midnight sky, that you're doing something that is counterproductive and probably doomed to fail. It has been my experience that when people use this expression, "I did it out of general principle," they are using this statement as a justification for something that is impulsive, poorly conceived, or just plain boneheaded, which made a mess in their personal or professional life. I see two different kinds of principles that fit this statement: doing something out of a reactionary pride or defiance because one's ego is bruised, or their feelings were hurt, or doing something out of a commitment to a vague rule that you are trying to apply across the board to all sorts of difficult life situations that require improvisational solutions to specific problems. The first of these two is simple to describe, and we've all done it. In the example with Teddy, he regularly engaged with spars with his supervisors when things don't go the way he wants, even when the offending event wasn't really that disruptive or important, and risked his job for no good reason. In fact, a few weeks before I started doing this chapter, a 40-something-year-old man reacted with rage over a car full of teenagers ding-dong dashing his house, ringing the doorbell and running away, and chased them in his own car at a reckless speed until the teenagers ran off the road and crashed into a tree. Several of the teens died in the accident, and this man, who had previously been a law-abiding citizen, ended up being charged with several counts of vehicular homicide and is going to potentially be finishing his life behind bars, away from his family. Thankfully, these types of incidents are usually less common. More common examples would be instances like telling off an old boyfriend that you know you shouldn't bother with, or perhaps refusing to go to a child's birthday party because someone will be there that you don't get along with, yet you know you should go, otherwise you'll end up disappointing the host. Or perhaps enforcing a rule that you are fully aware doesn't matter just because you can. Walking away from a business deal over a small amount of money that you probably should go through with just because. All of these are easily identified examples of reacting defiantly out of a bruised ego that we justify on the basis of principle. The second is a little more complex and needs just a bit more explanation. The best example I can think of involved a dispute that I was drug into the middle of on Facebook several years ago. Someone had linked a news story of a single mother who was struggling with her 12 or 13-year-old daughter's acting out behaviors. Specifically, the mother was upset over finding out the daughter was misrepresenting her age while texting adult men in their 20s. The daughter also speaking very provocatively to them and talking plainly about sex. As a result, the mother decided to take a drastic action and put together one of those old-style sandwich board signs that businesses would have someone wear outside of their stores as a walking advertisement with the sort of slogan on it about an ongoing sale or a special event. In this case, however, the mother handwrote a very critical description of her daughter's character and actions that went something like, "I'm a nasty little girl who texts adult men and talks about sex with them, and I have no shame," etc. Half the people responding were taking the aggressive position that this was absolutely the perfect thing to do because you can't just stand by and let her get away with stuff like that, and you have to remind her who the parent is. The other half were taking the position that this act on the mother's part was certain to destroy that poor child's self-esteem, and that you should never so openly be critical of your child and publicly humiliate her. The thread was already up in flames when I ended getting tagged in it. At some point, some of my friends and acquaintances who were in the middle of heated discussions realized I was tagged in the post. Someone asked me my opinion because I was a family therapist. Others then chimed in, asked me which side I was taking, and whether I thought it was a good idea that this exasperated mother put this provocative signboard on her child. No one seemed too happy when I said I didn't know. This brought a slew of demanding questions of why I didn't have a clear opinion. I posted, "I don't know because I didn't hear whether it worked or not." In my mind, if it caused the girl to feel ashamed of her inappropriate behavior, and it initiated the start of her acting in a self-controlled and age-appropriate manner, and not engaging in risky behaviors, then the mother hit a home run and saved her daughter from a multitude of misery. If it caused her daughter to ramp up the defiance and become even more aggressive and determined in her behavior, however, then it was absolutely a terrible thing to do, and it will probably end up furthering her self-destruction. Neither side liked my answer because I didn't pick up a principled response. Principles are valuable in the right setting. They are wonderful basic building blocks for developing personality to set into place to learn entry-level ethics and appropriate behaviors, and should be seen as just that. Where people get into trouble is when they want a one-size-fits-all approach to life situations and take a lazy approach to trying to apply these basic and generic solutions to very specific and complicated problems. The reality is that life is not that simple. As we mature, experience, see, and perceive things more clearly, we need to use custom and improvisational solutions to make things work and be better. Coloring with primary colors is fine when we're small and inexperienced, but eventually we should shift into using more complicated shades like periwinkle and magenta to fill in the spaces and answer the questions. When I hear people use this phrase, I can again almost bank with certainty that someone is sitting in front of me trying to justify using a generic solution or slogan as a response to a specific problem that has failed and subsequently made a mess. In fact, principles are at heart of most of the sayings in the book that end up having a toxic and self-defeating effect in our lives. Accepting that they are a general truth and not a universal truth is a big step forward behaviorally. The counter to acting out of principle is very simple in theory, if not in application. The answer to the question of what makes your life better and what makes the life of those of the people around you better is the counter to acting out of principle. You could take into account your children, family members, friends, employees, an employer, or maybe even people that you don't know. To ask this question means you value yourself and you value the things you have as well as the things you have accomplished. It also shows that you are able to care about the present and the future of those around you. Maybe it is a matter of perspective. Maybe it's a matter of self-esteem in that you do not feel that who you are is valuable enough to protect. Or maybe what you do is precious enough to keep from risking. Or maybe what you do have is precious enough to keep from risking. Or maybe what you do have is precious enough to keep from the risk of losing it. In my story, Teddy did not seem to have a healthy respect of what his work provided him in terms of status. His $80K salary that allowed him to drive a new Ford Quad Cab 4X4 and the ability to take golfing trips to South Carolina and live in a nice home with a 2-door garage. He did not seem to clearly see and value the reality that he had a professional position that provided him with a generous salary and great insurance. He also did not realize that he rated above and beyond the regular status and salary of most of his peers. Women were impressed with his position too. All of those things didn't seem to be enough for him to be able to see the need to protect his position. Instead, he did impulsive and aggressive things on occasion to his supervisors, customers, or pedestrians that seemed to threaten that very thing that fueled this life he has. The stories are endless and flow like a perpetual river if you know what to keep your eyes out for and ears open for. I hear them on a daily basis, both in the office and out of the office. The attorney who decided to make a public scene with a client and coworker argued loudly and dramatically over trying to coerce them to share his political position and got fired. The family friend who gets angry over someone cutting him off in traffic and gets into a fist fight with another driver in front of his children and ends up with felony charges. The woman who insists that everyone in her immediate family reject a cousin over a seemingly small slight and drives long-time relationships apart and fractures her family. Someone making a ridiculously hopeless and quixotic protest against a monolithic company that does nothing but make them look foolish and cause them night after night to have exhausted tears and fruitless anxiety. It goes on and on. The question is whether you want this to be you or not. Over time, and with the help of a good therapist, Teddy began to react less strongly and less generally to life situations, and began to react more thoughtfully and strategically instead. The therapist began to regularly quiz Teddy on what he should do to make his life work better, enhance his relationships and personal life, and challenged him when he was thinking about responding to situations by asking, "What makes your life better?" Slowly, Teddy began to see himself differently and seemed to value himself and his accomplishments more and more, and began to appear much less likely to do something prideful or self-defeating. He became more careful about where and when he expressed his anger, and began protecting his job by being less confrontational with his supervisors over small things that didn't really cost him any money or any real permanent damage at his job. He became less worked up over having to work a few minutes over his shift, having his route changed, or having someone getting in his way while driving. His reputation improved, and at the same speed that he made these changes, and his job became more secure. Furthermore, Teddy became better with his other relationships too, and became more patient and wiser about how to treat his nieces and nephews as they began to grow more attached and respectful toward him. Before long, Teddy's long-standing depression began to lighten, and his mood improved as he developed greater self-control. He gained more ability to make his life better, and he became less anxious about the stresses at work and home, as he now feels more prepared to handle them successfully. Slowly, the phrase, "I did it out of general principle," faded from his vocabulary, and everyone around him is better for it.